Thank you very much. Today's keynote speaker may come as a surprise to some among you. Certainly was a surprise to me when I heard about it. It's a he, it's a man. It's a man.
But he was with two women.
He was with two women, exactly. He knew about diversity already in the 70s, way before. Anyway, he's as big as they come in terms of worldwide fame and star quality. It's not Elvis, but close. When you listen to him, you'll realize that he is the obvious poster boy for an organization like EBU. What's more, he is in fact the EBU's mission and values of connecting competition, creativity and cooperation incarnate.
Allez, si vous n'avez pas encore deviné, je vais vous donner quelques indices supplémentaires. Il a gagné le concours de l'Eurovision en 1974 et depuis lors, il a vendu quelques 400 millions d'albums. Il chante, il compose, il écrit ses chansons et je suis sûre que vous avez en tête des paroles de ses best-sellers planétaires. If I said to you, Mamma Mia, Dancing Queen, Chiquitita, voulez-vous? Vous me répondez, ah. Non, non, non. Bon, je suis sûre en tout cas que vous avez de très beaux souvenirs des soirées endiablées qui vous ont tenu jusqu'à l'aube. Vous l'avez deviné, donc notre invité fait partie du groupe suédois, les mythiques ABBA. Je vous demande d'accueillir Björn Ulvaeus.
Thank you. What an introduction. And I'm sorry I'm not one of the ladies. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I probably wouldn't be standing here before you today if it wasn't for that magnificent flagship of the European public broadcasting. I mean, of course, the Eurovision Song Contest. Yes, as most of you know, I was in the winning team back in 1974, which means that it took you 44 years to invite me here to speak at this event. But what a launching pad that was. The Eurovision Song Contest is a big deal. And some people want to make it less of a big deal. They frown on it, they look down on it, they say it's shallow and devoid of deeper meaning and thus doesn't belong on public service media. Well, I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to you when I say I disagree. It would, of course, be monumentally stupid to start this speech in front of this audience by criticizing the Eurovision Song Contest. But that aside, I honestly disagree because I think the ESC is exactly what public service media can and should be, among a host of other things, of course, which I will come to. It's entertaining, it's broad and inclusive. And I have to say that no commercial network could ever do it as well as the EBU. I would say, you know, I was there, I know. In all its glory, those bright hours of fun somehow give us, I think, a sense of Europeanness. If there is such a word, there should be one. Because I am unashamedly grateful for having been born in this part of the world, this Europe, where despite all the setbacks with wars and other atrocities, the Greek and the Roman philosophers, the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, and much, much more, has paved the way for the liberal secular democracies we live in today. I won't say I'm proud of it because I had very little to do with this European history and how it developed, but I will say that I count myself lucky to be able to enjoy the benefits. Now, I have to admit that I wasn't always a fan of public service. I know I look very young, but I grew up before television. There was only one radio channel in Sweden, one public service radio channel, and they played 1 or 2 pop songs a week in one show on Saturdays. You can imagine I was starved. And then a pirate radio station popped up, Radio Nord, and they played pop all day long, interspersed with commercials. And how I loved Radio Nord. So when the Swedish Parliament shut it down, I consequently hated public service media. I was only 17. But even though I felt that way about public service media back then, there was never a shadow of a doubt in my mind that every word uttered on those Swedish radio programs was true. Because the people of Sweden trusted this wonderful institution 100%. Now, sadly, that trust seems to be slipping. A fresh survey by SIFO shows that trust in Swedish public service media, especially television, is going down and has been going down slowly from 2010 or thereabouts. It may be different in some of your countries. You all know what you're up against in your own countries. But I'm just using Sweden here as an example. Because I find this very disturbing and worrying. And why is it then, as it seems to be, that trust is on a slippery slope? Well, of course, there are many reasons. But I think one could be that fierce competition with commercial broadcasters sometimes may lead to, shall we say, a different journalistic ambition. An ambition to make every program, whatever the content, broad and entertaining. I recently had an experience that terrified me. I was the target myself. And what I saw from inside was SVT, Swedish television, acting like a tabloid in a show called Mission Scrutiny. Now, they interviewed me, so I knew for sure that they had all the relevant facts available in this particular matter. But they chose to select only those that fitted their preferred angle. And they painted a false picture in which I was decidedly a shady character, clearly to maximize ratings and clicks. I was hurt. Of course I was. But believe me, that's not why I'm telling you this. It's because it scares me as a citizen. I've been an inside witness to something which I think is the absolute opposite of what public service media should be. Short-term sensationalism is bound to erode long-term trust. I think there are fundamental values at stake here, and if they're lost, they'll be very, very hard to regain. The former, now sacked CEO of Cambridge Analytica said, "Things don't necessarily need to be true as long as they're believed." I say, We need sources we can trust more than ever. We need you. You've no doubt noticed that Mr. Xi of China has come to the conclusion that elections are cumbersome and unnecessary when you know who's best suited for the job anyway. And may I hazard a guess that Mr. Putin and Mr. Orban, perhaps Mr. Erdogan, are feeling inspired by his example? Will they follow in his footsteps? Now, Mr. Trump recently joked, maybe we'll give that a shot. And I'm not so sure it was a joke. But American democracy is robust, thanks to those enlightened men who wrote the American Constitution. If there is a God, may he bless them. Now, they must have thought long and hard about how to pass their values down the generations. George Washington said it beautifully. What could be more important than to pass civic values down to the future guardians of the liberties of the country? It seems a lot of young people nowadays take democracy for granted, and what else can you expect? It's been around for all their lives. It's like an old armchair to them. And they're also disappointed by it. So it's not surprising that some of them should be attracted by the old ideologies close to fascism and communism. But these young people have no idea what it would be like to live in such a political system. Now, I was born in the 1940s, and when I was about 5 or 6, I got hold of a book which I wasn't supposed to see. The pictures are still engraved in me. The death camps, emaciated human beings. My parents talked a lot about the war. And I hate fascism with every fiber in my body. And growing up with the Soviet Union looming large and ominous close to Swedish borders, I learned to hate communism too. It was a real and tangible threat. And I used to think to myself, what would I do if the Soviets invaded us? I was young, but I came to the conclusion that I would rather die than live under the communist yoke. But how does one convey this to younger generations who seem to be ready again to experiment, to try the same useless ideologies once more? Well, I say we need you for that. Because civic education in public broadcasting has always been at the core of the European democratic project. Certainly when I grew up, I might have found it boring sometimes, but it was always there. And I know it still is, but now there are so many other things competing with it. Nevertheless, I think it's crucially important that public broadcasting never ceases to point out and to show again and again that ideological alternatives to liberal democracy, from fascism to communism, and from autocracy to theocracy, they are as abominable today as they were in the past. Now, I have stood on many white cross on studio floors in TV studios all around Europe, miming to the latest ABBA single in my strange outfit. Those were the days. You only had to appear once in the local biggest TV show, and the next day, you know, everybody would know your song. My colleagues today have to work much, much harder. Well, it seems I will visit your TV channels again in digital form this time, because I think we have a new project together. At least I know that some of you are already involved. I am talking about a big ABBA tribute show this autumn with artists from all parts of the world. Now, Frida, Agneta, Benny and I had visitors from Silicon Valley last June. Techno artists, they call themselves. They photographed us from all possible angles. They made us grimace in front of cameras. They put dots on our faces. They measured our heads. Apparently, a cranium doesn't change with age the way the rest of your body falls apart. But the measurements, together with old videos and photos, makes it possible for these IT wizards to create perfect copies of ABBA version 1979. We thought we looked good that year. It's still a work in progress, but they've come a long way, and what I've seen so far is simply mind-boggling. These avatars will sing one of Benny's and my songs. You'll hear the voices of ABBA coming out of the mouths of the avatars, lip sync. And you won't be able to see that they're not human beings. It'll be spooky, but it's great fun. And no one has ever done it before. And there is, of course, an existential dimension to explore as well. What would it be like to be young again? The wisdom that we hopefully possess now, in combination with the youth of the avatars. Well, BBC Worldwide, as we know, have both global reach and experience of managing projects on a huge scale, and they're distributing this show. And the plan is to make it a global television moment. And they are now reaching out to top national and regional broadcasters like yourselves, who can be part of making this a shared experience all around the world, with simulcast transmission wherever possible. I can't help thinking it would be a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest. It sounds incredible, but they tell me it's absolutely doable. And what will the avatar sing? Well, I'm afraid I can't tell you that yet. But I can give you something to talk about. I can give you a clue. The title could have been the heading for this speech. And you'll know what I mean when you hear it, eventually, come autumn. Now, I'd like to end this speech with a plea. Trust is hard currency in this era of fake news. And you have more trust than most other institutions. People believe that you're telling the truth to the best of your abilities. Please don't ever devalue that. Please continue to be an institution that we can hang on to in this age of confusion. Because only public service media can guarantee fair and trusted content. Because of the unique way you are mandated and funded. And true public service media needs to be independent from commercial and governmental influences. So continue to develop and produce broad, entertaining shows like the Eurovision Song Contest and perhaps the ABBA show that I just talked about. but never forget to educate, give insight, and try to explain complex matters in an honest and scientific way. I know it's not easy, it must be very difficult. But you guys, you in this room, you are the ones who can do it. You decide. And we need you more than ever. I would say democracy itself, whatever future form it takes, needs you to promote and to defend it. Thank you.